Now, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful tools that you can learn in Blender, and also one of the most confusing. This was something that when I initially learned it, I wanted to avoid at all costs, and I still try to avoid it at all costs. It's one of those things where you use it at the end of the model making process to do details. So for example, this is great for making headlights or vents, intakes, very minute little detail things in which you have to usually cut away or carve or whatever. So just like when you're making in the clay modeling process, you make the whole car first, you do all the form, you get the proportions in, you do the graphics, all that. You save the details for last. When everything else is set kind of in stone, then you do the details. Same sort of thing for this process. All right. Here, calling this a guide mesh. So I just made a simple shape. I'm going to duplicate it by pressing Shift D. Then I'm going to do double click here and call this the shrink mesh. Now, if I go back to guide mesh, I want to make sure that this, which is normally at 2, I want to bring it to 4. And for the shrink mesh, I want to have it at 2. So you can see if I go back at 2, there's no sort of interlacing between these surfaces. But if I go back to 4, you see the surfaces start to change in mesh. And to illustrate this, if I were to apply this, you see all these squares. Now, if I were to double the amount of subdivisions and apply, there's twice as many. At least exponentially anyway. So what this is doing is this guide mesh layer, by being double of the shrink wrap layer, I can't speak right now, it's allowing you to project this surface from the shrink mesh onto the guide mesh, and you can cut and carve away and not have the best topology in the world. But as long as you are carving things correctly, then you will still maintain that surface underneath and maintain those perfect highlights. Let's get to this so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so if I go to add modifier, shrink wrap, target is the guide mesh layer. Then I go to object data properties, add, I'm going to add a group. Going to press A to select all the vertices, assign everyone in the group, and just as a frame of reference, and we'll go through more of this on the actual car itself, but you do not need to select all of them. You can just select a portion of the surface, but in this case, I want all of them. So now I've selected all of them. We're going to go to group, and it looks like nothing happened. However, let's say we delete a face. Okay, still kind of looks like nothing happened. But if I click off this display modifier for the viewport in real time, you can see how when this modifier is turned off, everything is no longer shrink wrapped on top of it. It's all extending upwards. So if we go back to the original guide mesh, it's below where this is at. So if I go back here, turn on the shrink wrap modifier, it forms perfectly over the original layer. So now that we're looking at this, I'll show you some more things that are really nice about having this shrink wrap modifier. So I pressed 1 to go into vertex mode. And let's say I didn't want like a circle pocket. I wanted something where there was a tight corner. So we got a bunch of edge loops running through here. And you're going to get kind of a little bit messed up highlights through here. But that's because you want to kind of space out your polys a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to want to make it into a crease. That's a bit cleaner. But let's say, just to really add drama to how much different it is. Here, you know, not perfect surface, but if we get rid of this, you can see just how off it is. Not only is there creases now, but it's also not maintained on the original surface. So again, you would want to move these vertices out of the way a little bit, so that way it could run through here cleanly. Really, you'd want to start to join some of these vertices together and have it wrap around a bit cleaner. But this is to show sort of an extreme example of how you can get corners or create, you know, for example, like a headlight shape into a perfectly clean surface without messing up the highlights underneath. And that's the basic process for a Shrinkwrap modifier. This is one of the things that, you know, it's a little bit difficult to grab onto, but with some practice and continuing to practice some details and understand when to implement it in the process, it becomes a valuable and, like, frankly, really invaluable asset in your Blender toolkit.
Imagine this. In 15 hours, you have the skills to make your own 3D car models in Blender, just like these students did. Don't spend months wandering from one YouTube tutorial to the next, and instead save your time and learn from someone who's in the industry and practice it every single day. My brand, Lumen Design Academy, has made this course, Car Modeling for Beginners, just for you. After teaching hundreds of students both digitally and at world-renowned car design schools, I'm confident I can teach you too. Whether you're a student or a professional, this course gives you everything you know to build a portfolio for school or land your next job. So what's inside? Well, the best part is no experience required. I show you how to install Blender, manipulate objects, move the camera around, so it doesn't matter if you're a pro or an absolute beginner, I got you. In chapter 2, we go over modeling a car. To do this, we use something called orthographics. Essentially, you just use points to go over an illustration, and just like you did as a little kid, we connect the dots. And if you can connect the dots, you can make this car. In chapter 3, we're gonna go over rendering, and I show you all the settings I use for both outdoor and indoor lighting setups to make your renderings pop. In chapter 4, we're covering animation. And I'm gonna show you how to move cameras, rig a car, and bring your model to life. And the best part is, Blender is completely free. In addition, follow me on Instagram to see what Lumen is up to next.